Welcome to the MCC Brussels Podcast, where we help you, our viewers and listeners, make sense of European Union politics, always grounded in clear thinking and the national interest. I'm John O'Brien, Head of Communications at MCC Brussels, filling in for my good colleague, Jacob Reynolds. Today on the podcast, we're looking at three major flashpoints shaking the Brussels bubble. First up, tariffs. President Donald Trump is back in the ring, and this time he's swinging straight at Europe. With 30% tariffs on EU goods, he is calling out what many on the right have long warned of, a complacent Brussels clinging to unbalanced trade privileges. Is this a reckless move or a long overdue reset in transatlantic terms? For Conservatives, this isn't just about retaliatory tariffs. It's a wake-up call. The EU's trade posture must be regrounded in strategic resilience, not moral indignation. Will Brussels learn to negotiate from strength or keep peddling lectures as industry bleeds? Next up, the Green Deal and our farmers. At MCC Brussels, we've always stood shoulder to shoulder with Europe's farmers. This week, they are once again forced back on the streets, protesting. The once sacred climate agenda is now politically exposed. The right is resurgent, and it's asking what many voters have been thinking. Who's paying for this transition? Why are farmers and workers treated like obstacles? And why is dissent framed as denial? From a Conservative standpoint, the Green Deal has morphed into a bureaucratic steamroller, driven by elites, enforced from the top down, and blind to social costs. The science isn't the issue. The politics is. Now that the Parliament has shifted, is it time to rethink green policy with realism, flexibility, and national control? Or will Brussels double down on climate orthodoxy regardless of the democratic blowback? Finally, the EU budget. The new 7-year budget is being drawn up, and it's looking more like a manifesto than a financial plan. Green earmarks, digital priorities, new EU-wide taxes, all presented as a fait accompli. But from the right, alarm bells are ringing. This isn't just about spending. It's about mission creep, with the Commission quietly expanding its reach into taxation, redistribution, and strategic investment areas that were once national prerogatives. What we're seeing, critics say, is integration through the backdoor budget as leverage, not consensus. Is there still space in Europe, in Brussels, for a Europe of nations? Or is this the beginning of an EU that funds itself, governs itself, and sidelines those who say no? Let's dive in. And to help us unpack these issues, I'm delighted to be joined by two colleagues, Paul Rougeron and Frank Ferrati. Let's dive in and unpack these issues. Paul, is President Trump's move to impose a 30% tariff a blunt instrument or a legitimate wake-up call to Brussels that its decades-long approach to trade has failed?
I think it's a blunt instrument. What I'm very scared about is that it will divide European nation. I will take a very precise example. In the automotive field, we are still very strong nowadays, and we have, for example, this huge group, one of the worldwide leader called Stellantis. So we have Peugeot and Citroën in it, and they produce European cars in Europe for the European market. And in part, and in this group, Stellantis, we have American car brands like Chrysler. We have also Jeep, Dodge, but they produce in America for the European market. So, for example, this kind of tariffs, would not impact Stellantis much. While for German car brands, it's absolutely another story. We know that they export a lot of their production in America, and this will impact them much, much more. So I'm afraid that we will have this division between our European companies.
Mm-hmm. Frank, are Brussels countermeasures aimed at preserving economic balance, or simply a political signal that ultimately may backfire on EU taxpayers and firms?
Well, at the moment, there aren't much countermeasures. I think Brussels has always been behind the curve, and they've taken a very long time to respond to the Trumpian initiative. And even someone like Juncker made the point that he couldn't understand why the Commission has gone into such a slow, painfully slow mode. It seems to me that at the moment, the Commission and the negotiators, European negotiators, are paralyzed. They actually had this fantasy that maybe they're going to get the same deal as Britain, and they were hoping to get a 10% tariff. And now that they've seen that that's not the case, they don't know how to respond, which is why their initial threat to bring about a series of countermeasures has been postponed. As it happens, I think that there is going to be a lot of negotiations, and it may not be the case that the 30% tariff will hold. But whatever happens, I think Europe is not in a position to take advantage of any situation, nor has Europe decided how it's going to live with a world of tariffs by making internal changes to its economic profile.
Mm-hmm. Paul, when some EU governments call Brussels' stance timid and powerless, is that criticism valid, or is caution justified given the potential impact on Ukraine support and other issues?
It's very hard to answer because I think that we have reasons to be timid. It's not only about the tariff, as you explained. America has like several weapons in their hands. They can withdraw the troops from Europe. They can stop delivering weapons in Ukraine, and it will cause harm to Europe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Frank, by delaying the retaliatory tariffs to buy time for talks, is Brussels showing strategic diplomacy or bowing too quickly to pressure from Trump?
Well, I think they're bowing to pressure from Trump. They might want to put a brave face on it. Mm-hmm. And the way they present it is that we're very clever tacticians. We reflect. We don't act very fast. Von der Leyen always says that we're continually monitoring the situation and we're civilized negotiators. But actually, they haven't got any trick up their sleeve, because the options that are available to Europe, such as, for example, putting taxes on American big technology companies or regulating them even more, in the end, have very high price for European consumers as well. And so they haven't really figured out how to, in a sense, adapt to this new world, a new world of tariffs, and that's where the problem is.
Mm-hmm. Paul, should the EU activate the trade bazooka, the anti-cohesion instrument, now to signal resolve, or should we keep up the ding-dong diplomacy? What do you think they should do?
I think we should, unfortunately, keep the ding-dong diplomacy. We always need to keep in mind that we are 27. We need to have a deal with not only between Europe and America as two countries, but and the US, as two countries, but as we are still the Europe of nations, and so we all need to agree on a line. And as I explained, only with just a random example about the automotive field, we will face issues. So we need to be very cautious about the deal. That's what I think. Yeah.
This week, we saw farmers again, not in their fields, but back on the streets protesting. We also are looking again at the Green Deal, now that the Patriots of Europe are in the driving seat. Has the Green Deal become so ideologically rigid that anyone who questions its methods, even in the name of affordability or sovereignty, is painted as anti-climate? Is this going to change, Frank?
I think it will, because the very zealous ideological defense of the Green Deal, particularly by the Greens in Parliament, cannot really hold. Virtually every other party fraction knows that there needs to be some change and they need to make accommodation, not simply because of the Patriots putting on the pressure, but also because their own electorate are very, very unhappy with the consequences of the Green Deal. And I think what we're seeing today is a situation where in the negotiations over the budget are likely to focus on the Green Deal and on farming as it happens, because the costs at stake are so high that unless something is done, it's going to be impossible to resolve the budgetary issue. Just simply putting more money into the budget isn't going to solve the trick. What you really need is a major fundamental restructuring of the budget, where the Green Deal's status and role is severely diminished. I think that's good for the budget. It's even better for the European economy.
Just following up with that, Frank, Patriots for Europe, the alliance, now represents the third largest group in Parliament. Isn't it democratically legitimate that they steer the climate talks, especially when the mainstream parties have failed to deliver a consensus?
Yeah, I think that it should be the Patriots that play this role. I mean, that by parliamentary precedent, that's the way that it should go. And the very fact that they're in the driving seat indicates a very momentous leap forward, particularly a leap over the quarantine that's been imposed upon them. But nevertheless, they're going to face a lot of difficulty in relation to this, because certain party fractions are so committed to the Green Deal that they're going to be policing it very, very carefully. So I think there's going to be a lot of disputes and a lot of struggles. But I think that in the end, because of the pragmatic calculations of all the party fractions, there's going to be some major concessions made in relation to the Green Deal. I think that's without a doubt.
Paul, does the fact that the EPP refused to support sidelining the conservative right suggest a growing bloc within the centre-right that's finally pushing back against climate radicalism?
Yeah, I really think that's it's a big shift. It's revealing what Frank was just explaining, that there is no consensus, and now they are still like even the EPP is like falling apart around this question. So I agree with the fact that the Patriots should lead, and also they will lead this Green Deal very cautiously. So I think that's the right way.
Paul, just following up with that, with farmers, truckers, industry groups increasingly alienated by the climate agenda, shouldn't the EU take this new parliament as a signal to rethink, not just repackage a green strategy? Like I'm wondering about young people in Europe. Like there was a time when young people have been propagandized right from the time that they're in kindergarten, all through school, about the green agenda. But when you can't get a house because people won't build houses, or it's impacting young people in their everyday lives. Do you think it's time to really, for the Patriots of Europe and other groups, to say, let's begin again?
Yeah, I agree. I face it in my personal life and also among my friends. I called a friend who is a farmer right before our podcast, and so he's a farmer. He plants wheat and corn, and he told me that he receives 25,000 euros annually from the CAP. And without this help, nowadays, his business can't survive. So he's forced to follow all the rules that are implemented by Brussels. And what's crazy is that, so he told me that the rules became so difficult to follow that most of farmers, 80-90%, have to be helped by the Chamber of Farming in France, which is mostly paid by public money also. So we give help, but to receive this help, we need also to help an administrative structure to get this help, which is kind of mad. And he told me that, so this meeting can go up to 3 hours, and they will scan like the pictures that they take monthly from drones. And he told me that he did this process like 2 months ago, and he had an issue because one tree was missing on his farm, and he had to write 50 lines to explain why and to somehow to be forgiven, why this tree was missing. And without this, he won't receive his money, and so he's gonna lose money this year.
Frank, we just heard from one of our farming friends this week that he had to sell his herd. We've been saying this for a long time, that slowly but surely this sort of green lunacy is killing farming. Is there, with the centre right being so compromised because they bought into this Green Deal as much as anybody else, is there a possibility that we can undo the damage done?
Not in the short run. I think that at the moment the battle is very defensive, because the battle at the moment is to ensure that the common agricultural policy is retained in its existing form. There's a lot of discussion about altering the way that money is given to the farmers. And so basically what we have now is a situation where the farmers are squeezed between this horrible Green Deal, which is like something out of the old Soviet Union. It kind of really forces them to kind of look at everything and to sign everything. It's a futile, pointless exercise which is imposed on them. Then there's also the additional money that's being devoted towards security, and particularly towards Ukraine. And a lot of farmers feel that the money that's being earmarked towards promoting the defense of Ukraine is going to be very much at their expense. Plus, they fear that the gradual integration of Ukraine is going to undermine their farming, mainly because of all the import of Ukrainian food products. So between Ukraine, between the security that's being devoted to that, plus the Green Deal, farming is in real trouble. So I say at the moment, the first step is to defend the status quo. And then once that has been achieved, then I think it's necessary to undo some of the damage, particularly by the Green Deal and the amount of money that's devoted to that, but also the way it kind of acts as an obstacle to the profitable development of European farming.
Paul, moving on, we now have a new 7-year budget is being drawn up, and it's looking more like a manifesto than a financial plan. What thoughts did you have when you saw the budget this week?
I understand the idea of the budget, which is like having new priorities, like the defense, the migration issue. I understand this, but I think that it shouldn't be used at the expense of agriculture, for example, as we expressed, and our purchasing power. I saw, I read the idea of new taxes, like tax about tobacco, for example, or tax on large non-recycled electronic parts. So it means you ask my opinion about young people, about the possibility to afford life, to afford housing, etc. So this very specific example, for example, it will lead to the fact that our fridge will cost more, our laptops, our dishwasher, all this will cost more. So it's again something against the living standards.
Frank, is Ursula von der Leyen's move to shift hundreds of millions towards defence and innovation at the expense of traditional cohesion and farm subsidies a bold step for EU competitiveness, or a centralised power grab that will undermine national sovereignty?
Number one, it is a centralized power grab, as is the budget. A 7-year-old budget means sort of more money being raised towards a centralized mechanism based upon Brussels. So it basically weakens the nation state. But I think in addition to that, it's got some very negative aspects to it. I think the way that defense is posed makes very little sense. I think the money is going to be thrown away because at the moment, if you are interested in security and defense, then your priority should be about defending Europe's border. I think once you defend Europe's border, then we can talk about some other stuff to do with increasing military capability. But in any case, We know that the European army is literally a non-existent serious force. The armies of Europe need to be strengthened on a national basis. That's got to be a national responsibility, because at the moment it doesn't make any sense for it to be more all-European, given the fact that we cannot even maintain our borders on an all-European basis, which is a priority. So I don't see very much innovation coming out of this. And I certainly don't see innovation being developed and enhanced by a centralized bureaucracy who's inherently inflexible. And just one point about the 7-year. Experience shows that the world economy doesn't stay still for 7 years. Right? Shifts and developments occur all the time. And it seems to me that a 7-year budget is the Brussels equivalent of Stalinist Moscow's 5-year plan, which is just as realistic as those 5-year plans were. I think it's about time we learned from history and adopted a much smarter approach towards economic development.
Great point. Paul, is this new budget sidelines cohesion and agriculture? They're two pillars of EU solidarity. What happens to trust in the European project in countries like Hungary, Poland, and Greece? Is the EU abandoning its original promise of sort of balanced development?
Yeah, I understand the feeling they can have about being abandoned. Like, of course, because I'm French, so I get more of what my French friends and connections tell me. They feel the opposite. For example, so my farmer friend that I called this morning, Thomas, the first thing he told me is that we can solve everything by just going back on before the CAP, when we were able to sell our product at the price we wanted, because it was the promise. You got the CAP. On the opposite, you need to reduce your selling prices. Mm-hmm. And so, but now they can't live without this help, and so they feel stuck.
Mm-hmm. Frank, with Brussels demanding new EU-wide taxes to fund green and digital transitions, are we seeing the quiet birth of a European fiscal state without treaty change, without public consent? Are these resources just federal taxes by another name?
Well, I think they are. I mean, that's the idea, because at the moment, Brussels is not responsible for nation states' taxes. The tax regime is decided by different national authorities. But if you begin to impose tax on a greater number of goods and products and services, then what you're doing in effect is you're taking away the power of the nation state to run their taxation and fiscal policies. And what you're doing in a sense is creating a situation where people's fundamental quality of life becomes directly influenced by the tax regime that exists within Brussels itself. So, in a sense, if you basically increase people's tax burden by 2-3%, doesn't sound very much. It's only cigarettes, it's only computer, it's only certain things. But actually, when you look at it in terms of the overall cost of living, it will make a severe impact on people's lives.
As the budget concessions are traded behind closed doors to avoid any sort of no confidence vote, can this still be called a democratic budget, or is it backroom deal-making dressed up as being European unity?
It's definitely in the backroom deal-making. If we don't know what's inside, if there is no large discussion about it, then there is no transparency. And it reminds me what happened during COVID with von der Leyen. We don't know all this, and then we will tell Europeans, oh, why don't you have any trust left for European?
Frank, this budget is going to impact European citizens, and yet European citizens don't seem to be very aware of what's going on, and the whole process is not very transparent. Is this business as usual in Brussels?
It is. I mean, people often mistakenly use the word democracy in association with the parliament and the party fractions. But democracy has no meaning in the European parliamentary context or in the negotiations that occur. There is no demos that can hold people to account. What you have, in a sense, I think it's the best way of understanding this, is a phenomenon that in America they call pork barrel politics. And what pork barrel politics essentially means is that one lane is responsible for giving people access to the pork barrel. The rest of the parties are in the business of trying to get as much as possible to kind of underline and defend their interest. And they all have very different interests. The Greens are obsessed with the Green Deal. The socialists are obsessed with social Europe and social cohesion funds. Everybody's got something like that. And what you have in behind the scenes is this very unseemly kind of competition as to who gets what. And in a sense, what the Commission does is to balance that out so that everybody gets something. And as long as everybody gets something, then the show can go on. And the pork barrel will be there for next year and the year after. So this is a very unseemly, oligarchical form of political life. And I think it's very, very important that we expose the fact that it is not just a little bit undemocratic. I mean, it's not even necessary to use the prefix "un" for democratic. Democracy does not exist, period. I mean, it's just entirely wrong to use that description when we're looking at these kinds of negotiations.
Thank you very much, Frank and Paul. Thank you for coming in and sharing your views. And thank you, our viewers. Please go and make a comment. Tell us what you think. We're interested in what your take on these issues are. Also, give us a like, give us a thumbs up, and of course, subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of our content that will be coming over the summer months. We'll be taking a little bit of a break from the podcast itself, but we will still be putting out some really quality content that the team here has developed, and I hope that you continue to tune into it. I'm John O'Brien, signing off for MCC Brussels. Until next time, thank you.